Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Zero from TechDragon.info, and today we'll be looking at the EVO 960, the NVMe drive from Samsung. Let's take a look at how this thing performs, and well, let's first build it into my computer so we can actually use it, shall we? And here we are at the computer. On the right hand side there you can see the slot for where we're going to put it in. So let's take a look at if we can get it in. First thing you want to do is take a look at what's basically what screw hole do you need. Well, by the looks of it, we need the third one, right where it says 2288. Yeah, imagine that. It's actually a 2288 NVMe, M2 slot, so or M2 drive. So that's good to know. So that first you have to get this little peg to sort of go in there, and I'm having a bit of trouble getting the dang thing in. Come on. Just for some reason, my case is still standing up, by the way. So for some reason, I just can't really get the thread here to. Oh, no, come back here, come back here. Okay, let's try that again. I couldn't really get the thread to actually take for some reason. It's a bit of a finicky thing. And of course it doesn't help if you're, everything is in your case, but it's definitely accessible and it's doable, so there we go. So first I'll figure out where that goes in and then screw it in. Look at those hands. Oh yeah. So we got that in. Next up you basically put in the drive. So can't really tell of course because big fat hand is in the way. But you basically slide it into that little standing up little slot that's there. Trying to get it in here. It's like I said, it's a bit difficult to get it in. And I know my hand is in front of the camera, but I think I move it in a second here. Come on. But having a little bit of difficulty. There we go. As you can see here, it's a little bit up from the slot yet. So you get the screw, and this is not the best camera angle, is it? Try to get the screw in, and you basically screw it down. So I guess we'll be back with some benchmarks and see how this thing performs, but that's about it. That's how easy it is to install these things. Even when there is just, when your computer is in use already, when everything is in there, you can fasten it pretty good, pretty quickly, pretty good, pretty easy. There we go, it's in, that was it. A couple of minutes, no, not even minutes, is it? A minute or so, it's easy as all hell. So let's take a look at the performances of this thing, shall we? And here we are with the first set of benchmarks. Now there's a couple of grains of salt that you need to take, and we'll explain them all. So we're currently looking at the top left corner here, which is my C drive. That's currently 81% full. It's a Crucial hard drive, and it's been on for well over 300 days of consecutive running in total runtime. So it's seen better days. So this is definitely not the peak of its performance, but just so you get an idea where this new NVMe drive is situated in the whole spectrum. So we have this one, which is my SSD. We have this one in the middle here, my X drive, as you can see here, which is a RAM drive. That's why numbers are so high. And on the right, we have the F drive, which is the Samsung. Little side note, we'll get to that. There's two updates to it. We'll get to that in a moment. So let's take a look here. Let's just compare them, I guess, horizontally for right now. So we're looking at 553 read, and that's MB per second. Versus 9000 on the RAM drive. I mean, it's memory, it's supposed to be quick. Versus 2000, yes, 2041 on this new EVO. So that's pretty good. That's a 4x gain there. That's pretty damn good. Now, if we look at the right, 448 is sequential, by the way. Important note. 448 versus 7000 versus 1800. Again, it's about a 4x profit here. And I'm just mainly comparing the SSD to this because, yeah, screw this. Actually, give me one moment. I do believe... Let's get this one in here as well, just for some comparison's sake. So, now we have a complete picture. So we have, this is a HDD, spinning drive, as it was known. It's a Western Digital, it's a 5400 RPM. It's not great, it's just for pure storage, so don't really care about the speed. I think it's a blue label, I do believe. Not sure, might have been a green label. blue? I think in blue. Anyways, doesn't matter. Anywho, just so you get an idea of what kind of improvement an SSD is already over an HDD hard drive, spinning hard drive. So 500 versus just barely 100, 450 pretty much versus 100, 324 versus 0.75. This is random access. It's terrible at random access. Absolutely dreadfully bad. So yeah, that's the difference. We got another different sequential here. Again, 400 versus just about 100, and then the 4K. I do believe this is 4K random access with some other stuff as well. I don't remember exactly what the entire definition was, but it's basically full spread random access of anything and everywhere. 26 MB versus 0.3 MB, 483 on the RAM drive, and 38 on the new NVMe drive, the EVO. But again, asterisk, we'll get to that in a moment. Now I've run some different benchmarks so you can get some different views of what different benchmarks have to say. This AS SSD is just one of the benchmarks I found on my drive, still laying around. It's not a good benchmark because if you look over here, it is not really doing too well. I had to cut out the 4K test because it wasn't even working. Now we could, let me live run it here. Let's run another benchmark. I have done some things. Maybe it's better now. Let's take a look if that is actually the case or not. And again, I will get back to that in just a moment, what I'm talking about. So let's select our Samsung here and let's do a real life run. Okay, yes, this has fixed it. It seems, yes. Much better. Let's let this run, live run as you can see here, but this will be a much better indication. So what the difference is I've installed the Samsung driver rather than the Windows driver for NVMe, and Samsung one does a hell of a better job. So let's let this run here. Well, in the meantime, let's take a look here. So we have 500 MB versus 1700. I've seen this usually up into 1800s, but yeah, just, you know, comparison. 400 versus 1400. And we move over to the 4K, we're looking at 28 versus 44. And on the right part, 85 versus 136, pretty damn good gain there as well. Not quite double, but yeah. So these are just slightly different tests. The results are going to be slightly different as well. This one does belong over here. This benchmark does not allow me to benchmark my X drive, which is my RAM drive, so sadly we can't take a look at that. If you look at it here, actually if you look at the other one, Samsung NVMe controller, and this is the standard controller that Windows uses, so that is a difference, but again, we'll get back to that in just a moment. So, access times much better. If you look at the HDD, 16 milliseconds versus 0.11, much better, versus 0.032, even better. So access times are even better. Just, you can compare the numbers across the board, it is much better. So that is quite the improvement already. Now, let's move over to the next section. We'll be right back as soon as I get that up. And we are back. So what you are currently looking at is the Samsung Magician, basically driver software, or software where you can see stuff. If you look at this, it actually shipped with an older version of the firmware, which is not great. Not gonna lie. So that was not great. So I updated that. All the tests you just saw were performed without this update. I will get back to you in a second here with an updated version. And after that, I just talked about it, there's also a driver that you can install. So instead of using the Windows NVMe driver, the Microsoft driver, you can use Samsung's driver, and that gives you a small performance gain as well. I'll put links in the description where you can get that, where you can get the Magician software, so you can get those two. But let's take a look at some of the, let's close this and take this out, some of the benchmarks that I've run. So, first off here is a sequential read-write comparison between the drives. So we have the HDD, the Western Digital, read and write pretty terrible. If you look already, SSD, pretty huge improvement over an HDD. And then we get to the NVMe with this is the old driver. You can see it from the 1 here, and the number 2 here is the second version, so the second driver. So already this is the difference between a driver update on the drive. That's a pretty substantial update already. So pretty good on that. Moving up here to the second graph, we are looking at sequential again, read and write, and I just put the RAM drive in here for comparison. RAM drive, if you don't know what it is, it's a drive that maps out a section of your memory and uses it and emulates a hard drive. So it's not as fast as full memory, but it's still pretty good. So as you saw, the HDD gets blown out of water by the SSD. The SSD gets blown out of water by the NVMe drive. And the NVMe drive gets blown out of every proportion by the RAM drive. Just figured I would include it here just for argument's sake. I think it looks nice to see the comparison. So, moving on here. This is the comparison between the old NVMe driver, the new driver, and the new driver with the Samsung, sorry, not driver, firmware. Let me correct that. So this is the first firmware, the old firmware, updated firmware, and then the updated driver with the updated firmware. So you can see here, sequential read. This is all read, by the way, the whole thing. Sequential read gets progressively better as we update the firmware here. We already see a nice jump in every single one of these. The 4K is not as visible, but there was a minor jump there as well. And then once we go up to the NVMe driver from Samsung, there's actually a small gain to be seen as well. It's not very prominent. There's not much between these, and these are almost identical as well. Again, the 4K had a little bit of a jump, but quite tiny. And the sequential read here also, as you can see, has a little bit of an update. Once we go over to the right, it's a little bit more prominent. Sequential writes are pretty much the same, not much of an update there. The 4K Q32T1, which is the second one out of the graph that we saw earlier of the drive benchmark, you can see a substantial improvement. Again, with the sequential here one as well, and the 4K you can see a small improvement as well. So definitely worth updating all of that. Now moving over, I have actually discovered something really interesting that I had no idea was the case. So we're currently looking at Ashes of Singularity. I actually made a typo, Singularity. This is the installation time. Now this is installation through Steam, and what I didn't know is that your download speed that you see in Steam is actually limited by the underlying system that installs it. So it will download a component, install it, and then download the next component, install it, and that will actually delay your download speed. So it looks like you're not downloading at your full speed, but that is actually your underlying hardware that's your limiting factor. And this is the time in seconds that it took to install the game. So 700, and I think it was just shy of 700 seconds, which is just about 11 minutes, give or take. And once we switched over to the NVMe drive, and this was a repeatable test, by the way, was not a fluke. I repeated the test because I couldn't believe it. Once we switched over to the NVMe drive, we were down to 4 minutes of installing 11 gigs. And my download speed is about 60 plus MB per second, max. Yeah, that's about 60 MB, give or take. I think 68 MB per second, so pretty damn good. So that's not the limiting factor here. The hard drive and just the installing of it, again, this is a repeatable test, and it just showed this much of a difference. So from 11 minutes down to 4 minutes of install time. And then we take, I also took a look at booting up a game. I don't have that many games nowadays that are easily portable between my drives, so I just took one that I had, Water Tanks, and this is where the drives don't really shine. An NVMe drive will not be as good when you look at boot up times. Boot up times often are limited by a whole bunch of other stuff where it just needs to grab a bunch of stuff, just needs to grab everything together, and it's just not as much as different as you would probably want. So this is in seconds, so there is just about a 4% difference here. It's not much. So with the SSD we're looking at 12.72 seconds or something, and with the NVMe drive we are looking at 12.21 or so seconds. So really we're looking at 21 to 20, 12.21 to 12.71. I mean, we're talking points of seconds here, and this is averaged out over a couple of boot ups. So it was across the board faster with the NVMe, but really not all that much. So overall games, I would say, yes, there will be a small performance game in boot up, but it is marginal at best. So that was it. That is the new NVMe drive. Some cases very surprising of how fast it was. And if we take a look at this one, very shocked at the updates here. So definitely the newer firmware, excuse me, definitely worth it. And switching out to the Samsung driver, again, worth it as well. Again, link in the description. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. And in the meantime, I'm going to install all my Steam Summer Sale games because I have more than enough space now. Woohoo! Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.